We got the live sound out there in the end. Okay, so that's just going to play behind me. And really what we need to be able to do is understand landscape in profile. And we have to look at land and identify elements in land that give us planning points and lines and contours. A lot of us, it's extremely simple, but if we don't start with confidence, if we don't get our mainframe understanding, then we can be continuously doubting what we're doing. So when you're planning something that's going to be permanent, which food forests are, they should go on indefinitely, then you need to have a real mainframe foundation that you're absolutely confident about. And they're often quite simple things, but if you're not given that confidence initially, it's like learning your ABC, you know? And then reciting the whole 26 letters of the alphabet confidently. It's not something you learn straight away, of course. It takes a little while. You have to repeat it quite a few times. But you have to be absolutely 100%, no doubt whatsoever, confident that you understand that. So starting off by finding the highest point, the lowest point on a property, the orientation of a property, where it goes from too steep to work easily, too flat or a gentle slope, to what you call flat, which is not actually ever completely flat. Even your salt pans, and we were on one of your salt pans past Pallet yesterday filming, they're never completely flat. There is a very slight slope, even on a salt pan. And we got asked a lot about flat because we deal with contours, we talk about aligning with contours and harmonizing with landscape so that we can trap the rain, we can trap the nutrient, we can spread the nutrient without costing energy by just applying design initially. A lot of people, large numbers of reference on our online course, came and said, what do you do on flat? What happens in flat? Permaculture probably doesn't work when it's flat then. Well, most farmers actually like it flat because it's easier to work on flat, and you have less earthworks to hold up water or drain off water if you want to drain it off. Mostly we want to hold it up. But you have other issues when it's flat. You need to know where the wind's coming from because you're more exposed to the wind. You have less wind breaks, or you're more open. So you need to read landscape in all these different ways. You need orientation, you need slope, you need to define the outer edges of a property. So now, when we're talking edges, we're not just talking boundary. Of course we are talking boundary because all properties are surveyed and they have some kind of edge. But we're talking edges generally. The lowest point and the highest point are edges, and there is an edge between the slope and the flat. If there's a transition on your property, there's an edge between where it's too wet or where you come to a lake, a river or a pond. So you're defining the edges. So you're doing a lot of patterning. You're understanding, you're defining patterns on a landscape before you start design. Let me give you a very simple example of what will confuse you quickly. And it's when I put two elements together in one statement, and suddenly just that little bit of extra information makes it hard to capture in your mind. I'm not saying it's because you can't do it. I'm just saying if you're not used to it. If you were learning a new alphabet, it would be no different in a new language, let's say. Let me say, when you're on a property and you're trying to define a starting point, you say, where do I start? I've got to do all this design, I've got to connect things together. What gives me a confidence to start somewhere? On most properties, which are usually quite square, if it's not a big, long, strange shaped property, your average squared off property, the lowest point on the highest boundary is usually the longest, highest contour line. Now in a class, you're just being polite. Someone usually says, say that again. Right? I only combined a couple of things there, right? And all of a sudden it went, what? You know? So if you go to the lowest point on the highest boundary, so your boundary of your property, your lowest point, whether it's the middle of the high boundary line, that usually means it's a valley, or whether it's one end, if you start at that point and project level around the landscape, the landscape's already there, so you just got to find contour line, which is level. It will be the longest, and it will usually be the longest and the highest line of contour on the property. Now the reason you might want to know that is because that can be a very passive water harvesting line to put in some kind of earthworks. It could feed water from one end to the other. It could spread nutrient. There's lots of reasons. There's multiple functions of possibilities that you could use that line for. But right at this point in time, it's just you reading the landscape. It's just you reading a point and saying, oh, let's have a look at that. Is it as valuable as it might be? What is the potential of that line? It gives me a start to get out there and look at landscape and then walk across that landscape. So, but it's surprising how when you just put two elements together, suddenly it's complicated, because you actually know in your mind that that's a 3D landscape. You look at it on a map, it's flat. And when you get out there, it's all curvy. If you're good at reading contour maps, you can see the 3 dimensions. But it's quite common we're not good at reading contour maps. We're sort of contour dyslexic when we look at maps, a lot of us. And the thing with the internet, which is great, I mean the internet's great, of course, but most of us are looking down all the time. Right? You've seen the YouTube video Look Up? There's, you know, we average 40 hours a week looking at a screen of some type. The new teenagers are now screenagers. They spend 60 hours a week looking at a screen of some type. That's true. Most of us probably spend 40 hours a week looking at a screen of some type. It's a phone, an iPad, a computer or television. But we've got more information available to us than ever before. We've got apps that do all kinds of things on a smartphone. Amazing. So we feel like a lot of people are coming to our courses and we're noticing they feel like they know everything, or they can know everything if they want to, but they're less and less capable of doing it. They're losing practical skills. Nobody knows how to set a chicken on eggs anymore. And yet your great-grandmother or great-grandmother definitely would know that an egg stays fertile for 30 days after a chicken's laid it, if it's a fertile egg, as long as you turn it every day in the kitchen. And you can stick it under a chicken anytime you like that's brooding in that 30 days, and it still hatches in 21 days after she starts. Although there might be eggs of different age in that 30-day period underneath her. But I don't know how many people I have to explain that to. And chickens are a gateway animal to food. I mean, that's why chickens are popular worldwide, is because, you know, you don't have to refrigerate eggs, you don't need teeth to eat them. You know, babies can eat them, old people can eat them, you know. A friend of mine calls them, like, you know, they're a major stone in the food security wall, you know. And often once you keep chickens, you keep a few other animals, but there's a lot more to learn when you start getting into other animals as well. So, you know, people are coming, they're more and more informed, or they think they are, or can be. They're more and more, they have less and less capability to do anything, and therefore they're more and more concerned. So when we can pull you off the internet with the internet to get more engaged in reality, that's a great tool. That's really something special. And that's what we've been able to achieve with these online courses. We've been able to pull you out with this high-tech information. People were going on the forums and talking to each other, we're watching, they're saying, I'm watching the online course at work.
travelling as far as possible, as slowly as possible, over the most time, taking the longest possible to get there, with as much passive friction. In other words, interacting with as many elements as possible along the way. Passive friction is the most fertile, is the principle of water, because it's going to get there in the end anyway. Because there are certain constants out there in the universe. There's a New Age saying, only constants that change, man. Well, it's not true. There are a few constants out there, and you can anchor on them as a designer, and one of them is water only moves at right angle to contour. If you want to know how water moves across surfaces, it moves at right angle to contour. Now you're looking at landscape, when you're looking at a contour map, you're looking at the right angle to water. Water moves at right angle to those contours. That's why the valleys are wet and the ridges are dry. You can't move water uphill for free, well, not on volume. Trees suck it up a long way. You get a bit of capillary action in soils and some materials, and that's it. So the only thing you can do is hold water out on contour to hold it up as long as possible. The higher it is in landscape, the more energy it has in relation to its gravitational pull. Water at height has energy potential, and the lower it goes, the more life it will contain. When you start to think this through in design application, it all starts to go off in interesting complications. And every time you apply it, evolutions happen that reveal themselves to you. No matter what I could teach you as far as becoming a designer is concerned, all I give you is a key into that room. And you're thinking that way. There are multiple doors then you can open that reveal themselves to you, and on you go. The systems that you work with teach you. That's why it's so engaging. Because you're being taught by what you're actually engaging in. By taking the directive to act, you self-educate, and it starts to, you keep having these revelations of events, and oh wow, look at that, look at that, look at that. And the interesting thing here is, what makes it very interesting in Reno is that the general opinion is it doesn't work here. It ain't going to work here. It may work somewhere else, but it ain't going to work here. Well, that's great, because it's going to stand right out when it does. And that's a great place to start, because when you can prove it here, it's like, there you go, it stands right out. When we greened the desert, when we did the Green in the Desert project, well, that was the best testament ever. I mean, put an oasis up in the desert, everybody's going to notice. Put an oasis up in the Amazon, you have a job to find it. And if there's a skeptics, if people are skeptical, of course it's going to stand out. The